welcome everyone. It is now June 9th, 2020, and we are so appreciative that you are here for our final session in our CRWP webinar series. But before we get started with today's activities and our conversations, we would be remiss if we did not take a moment to acknowledge a few things. Number one, as we are here in our webinar, there are memorial services for George Floyd going on, and that is obviously a big event in the world given the recent protests. And while it's hard to know what we can do, we do know that there are small steps we can take to get started. And Jeremy and I, both members of NCTE for a long time, thought that it would be worthwhile just to share that there is a pretty interesting event coming up through the National Council of Teachers of English a little bit later here in June, and that is a conversation with author and scholar Ibram X. Kendi about his new book, Anti-Racist Baby. And I'm going to drop a link to that upcoming event for NCTE that you can register for in the chat room. And we're just going to take a moment to pause and silent reflection before we jump into the rest of our activities today. Thank you for taking just a few moments. And however you're engaging in conversations around these issues of inequity and racism and injustice, we know that they are deeply intertwined with what's going on with the pandemic and unfortunately with our educational system. So maybe some of those conversations will happen in the minutes to come as we engage in a slightly different webinar session for this final time. But we do welcome you to enjoy this moment to pause and to write and to be together. Jeremy, did you want to say anything else about NCTE's work? You are an ambassador for NCTE, and you may be hearing some other conversations that are going on with them as well.
The only thing that I'll add, Troy, is that NCTE has always taken the position of, being very equal in everything that they do and making sure that all individuals are recognized. And so I just want to take a moment to make sure that that is made clear. And they are definitely making plenty of opportunities available for anyone to participate, whether you are an NCTE member or not, in any of their webinars that they have coming up, especially with the one that Troy has posted here. So not anything different in terms of what Troy has said, but just again echoing that they do take that stance in terms of giving equal opportunities to everybody and all voices being heard. And there are plenty of opportunities and plenty of people. If you reach out to the hashtag NCTE Village on Twitter, that is a great place if you are looking for resources in terms of, how can I start this conversation in my schools? There are a lot of individuals that would help you with that.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And not to put Andy on the spot, but I think he might have shared something on Twitter the other day, some resources for English language arts educators interested in anti-racist education. And maybe Andy, if you have that link, you could drop that in the chat for us as well too. I'd really appreciate it. So
will do.
Thank you. All right. Well, with that, we're at a unique moment. 8 weeks ago, we started this conversation about learning continuity and not knowing what the rest of the spring would look like. Here we are. We are in June. Some of you, as you noted before we started recording today, have finished up your school year. Some are still right at that final moment where you're getting those last few assignments from students and wrapping things up in the next few days. We had some humorous stories about students turning in some work. For some reason, seniors still wanted to turn in work. Go figure. But anyway, we're here in June. It's the end of the year, and we're kind of taking a moment to pause and to think about what our next steps are, both for our students as well as for ourselves. So with that in mind, I'm going to be very, very quick going through some of this basic stuff since this is the last session anyway. It is June 9th. We've already established that. It is the open forum. We've already established that. We have one slot left in our Remote Literacy Learning Institute. We'd love for you to join us. If you'd like to, let me know. Today's Zoom, actually, we're really going to encourage you to take the microphone and share. So as I said, we'll kind of bop and weave and see how it goes. If we feel like we want to pause the recording for smaller groups to interact, we can do that. And of course, this whole series is brought to you by teachers from the Chippewa River Writing Project who have donated their time, talent, and expertise. If you've appreciated the series and want to support the work of the Writing Project, feel free to go to the giving.cmich.edu domain and pick the Chippewa River Writing Project there. And also, if you or anyone in your district is interested in further professional development, feel free to contact me. One slot left. I've said it a couple times, but just mention it one more. If anyone's interested, now's the time to sign up. We're getting ready to send out some information to all our participants who will be starting with us next Monday, and we're really, really excited. We just had a planning team meeting this afternoon, and the whole facilitation crew is just really excited about our 2 weeks that we'll have with this group. With that in mind, there are many questions, and rather than letting them linger on screen here for too long, we're going to get into thinking about it with your questions. Let me have Jeremy do a formal quick introduction of himself. I'll introduce myself and then we'll get into the good stuff.
Hi, everybody. If you've been here before, you've seen my face around. You've heard me ramble on about things. My name is Jeremy Heiler. I am a middle school English and science teacher here in the state of Michigan. And I currently teach 6th and 7th grade. May change next year. Who knows with all the chaos that's been going on. We'll just have to wait and see. And you can find me on Twitter at Jeremy B. Baller. Anytime you want to reach out to me. And if you have any questions or you want to work through something, please let me know. I'm available.
All right, thank you so much, sir. And I'm Troy Hicks, Professor of English and Education and Director of the Chippewa River Writing Project at CMU, and also a co-author with Jeremy on a few projects. Our most recent one called Ask, Explore, Write, an inquiry-driven approach to science and literacy learning with our colleague Willeen Pangle from CMU, and also book birthday about a week ago with my friend and colleague Andy Shinborn for creating confident writers. So a few of our resources there if you're interested in checking them all out. All right, so really quickly, what I want to do, I'll stop my big screen sharing here and let everyone know that we're drawing this inspiration from a group called the National School Reform Faculty. And there's also another group called the School Reform Initiative. I've seen these protocols on both of their websites, but in particular, what's important about the protocols is that there are really, really great and free resources out there. So whether you go to the SRI website or the NSRF website, they have dozens and dozens of protocols, which are tools for structured conversation. And many of them are useful. Jeremy and I used the Collaborative Assessment Conference one when we were writing a book earlier, a couple of years ago, as a way to look at student work. We've used the Charette protocol to have teachers present their work, other kinds of just wonderful resources. I've used the Barriers and Bridges in workshops before. So many great protocols here. The one we happen to draw from today is called the Futures Protocol, or sometimes goes by this Back to the Future. And the idea here is that you are about to imagine yourself a year from now. Let's imagine, or sometime during the next school year. And you got a little bit of the prompt in your email from earlier today to sign into the webinar, but you are going to try to write what we'll call a present tense narrative. So maybe this narrative will be written in August of 2020. Maybe you'll be writing as if you were in the perspective of October of 2020. Maybe it will be as if you were writing in the perspective of January 2021. It just kind of depends where you think you want to write this narrative from. And one of the things that we're going to ask you to do is try to be really specific. So even if your narrative is still sitting in front of this computer doing remote learning, focus on still the sights and the sounds and the feelings and the sense of accomplishment. What would you have maybe just heard in a Zoom call conversation with your students? Or what would be a note that you just got from email? What would be some comments and dialogue that you'd be having with students on one of their essays? Whatever snapshot you want to try to capture here, now is your time to try this. And as a kind of mentor text of sorts, I believe Jeremy's got just kind of a few ideas that he wanted to kind of puzzle through with you and imagine that he was discussing his narrative. And I just moved out of that weird screen mode. Apologies. Let me put it back into the normal full screen mode. And Jeremy can share a little bit of his thoughts about what his future might look like.
Yeah, so just to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of where my thought process is right now as a teacher is, there are obviously there are unknowns. We don't know what the situation is going to look like when we get back in the fall to teaching and what our teaching is going to look like. And so my mentality is that I want to prepare my instruction that can benefit both face-to-face and online, if that is the case of whatever direction we go to, whether it's leaning to one side or the other, or if we're in the middle and doing a blended sort. So that's kind of where my mentality is, just to kind of give you a little bit of what my thinking is. And then in a perfect world, I would like to be back to school if I was thinking about this in the future and being face-to-face. And so what I'm thinking of is that, we're into the school year, and students are attending. Half our students are attending, on those given days that are there, because they're alternating days, and then Fridays are remote learning. But each student now would have their own Chromebook, going more to a one-to-one setting, even though we do have plenty of technology for our students now. And if needed, then there's Wi-Fi hotspots for our students. And then all students have access to a program or to a reading accessibility program that can help them access a variety of text with text-to-speech. And then I'm also thinking more along the lines of that there would be more synchronous activities that were going on in terms of class. Obviously, we have face-to-face, but even if in a remote setting, I'd like to have some synchronous activities going on instead of me recording a video and then pushing it out to my students. But if I'm thinking of a typical day, if it's Monday morning, I'm just finishing a face-to-face lesson where we discuss human impact with the novel Hoot by Carl Hiaasen. And if you've ever read any of Carl Hiaasen's books, they're very highly engaging for students. I know that my sixth graders definitely love the book Hoot. And this is a great opportunity for us to bring in some science literacy with the human impact piece. Meanwhile, at home, my students are engaged in a lesson when they're doing the remote learning and doing something with a hyperdoc. And I can definitely drop some links in when Troy is talking here. I can drop in some links for hyperdocs into the chat in terms of, there is a book specifically to hyperdocs. And the reason why I say hyperdocs is because, like, going back to what I was talking about before with my initial thinking is that if there's going to be this face-to-face and this blended remote learning, that the hyperdoc can meet the needs of the students in a face-to-face environment as well as a blended environment. And then in my perfect world is that there is lots of feedback, there's lots of conferring, and there's lots of reflection that's taking place, and not only by me, but by my students, and being able to give them effective feedback to advance them not only in their reading skills, but in their writing skills as well. And then in terms of what that looks like, it would probably look like having meetings, Zoom meetings, and also being able to sit down and have those one-on-one conversations in the times that they're back to school as well. So that's where my thinking is right now in terms of what, a future would look like. I'm actually looking forward to hearing a noisy middle school classroom again. I would really love to be able to hear that coming in the fall. So I'll just wrap up by saying that I miss my students, and I'm hoping to be able to do some engaging activities with them, like the ones you see on the screen when it comes to the fall.
All right, thank you so much, Jeremy. So here is what we're going to do. Here are a few other things that you might think about as you're writing. And this is where we're going to go after your writing and kind of think about the issues and the concerns and the thoughts that might be embedded in your narrative. So I just wanted to put these on screen. We're going to come back to these, but these are just some things that you can think about while you're writing. And we are, as we have in the couple times previous to this webinar, take about 5 minutes for you to engage in some writing. So this is a moment where, feel free to turn off your camera and be focused. And maybe if you've already started some writing, you could share that writing with us and even build on it. I'm about to drop a link to a shared Google Doc where we can all go ahead and do that kind of collaborative writing. You will see that there is a series of lines in there in the rows where you can put your name in and then go ahead and drop your thoughts in for the narrative. Next to that, I'll wait just a few moments to make sure that everybody's in there, and before I kind of go off screen and write myself for about 5 minutes. But what questions might you have for us as you're getting ready to jump into that shared writing space? All right, so yeah, thank you. If you were able to write somewhere else and you'd like to drop that in there, feel free to do that. We would greatly appreciate you being able to share a little bit. Like I said, we'll kind of open up the mic at this point and let people talk and then offer some responses. If it feels like we have a little bit too much awkward silence, we might just pause the recording and move into breakout rooms. And with that, I know it sometimes is kind of hard to know exactly who wants to go first or when or where. Hopefully you have an option where you can raise your hand in the Zoom settings, or on the bottom bar there should be the reactions. You could always just give me like the thumbs up or waving like, hey, I want to, oh, then there we go. It looks like Andy might want to go first. So I'm going to let you take it away, Andy, and let you share a little bit of your futures imagining for the 2020-21 school year.
Yeah, mine's pretty short, but I just wrote that I can hear the busyness in the hallways. Some students are glad to be back. There are hugs and fist bumps from students and teachers alike. First day of school seems a bit like a celebration. Before we know it, I want to say probably after first hour, maybe after lunch, we're starting to get settled back into the routines and the flow of a traditional school setting. The greetings and meetings canvass a range of conversations about social distancing, Black Lives Matter, the president, the politics of the world. Some kids joke around about all of it and others raise concerns. And I kind of just imagine it kind of back to normal as much as we possibly can be. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for. And normal looks like a whole lot of different things, right? I wanted to write something about, does the drama begin in the hallways again? Those things that we don't really miss as teachers, but those are things that we also see as kind of part of school, sort of in the busyness and the in-betweens and all those types of things. So that's a little bit of what I wrote about in that session.
Right. Thank you. And we'll all give some snaps here. We can also give reactions, of course. We'll give a round of applause through our Zoom reactions as well. Thoughts, response, maybe one person who'd want to say something that they heard from Andy's piece that resonated or that you felt connected to in some way.
I know for me, the one thing that I connected with Andy was when he said, that drama, that's always that begins in the hallways. And, as funny as it is, it seems like I miss that, we haven't been around it in so long that I truly miss that part of it. And, and I think that at times our students get us involved in that drama because they trust who we are and those relationships that we've built with those students. And I think ultimately that's probably what I miss the most, is just, you know, those relationships that we have with the kids.
All right. Thank you, Jeremy. All right. Would someone else like to share a little glimpse into your future? Oh, okay, Becky, I see that you want to share. Just got to get your mic on there.
I can share. So I wrote, today I'm sitting in my classroom. Students are asked to come back for half day today and tomorrow to return books, materials, and get their schedules and lockers assignments. Half the students come today, the other half tomorrow. We also went over procedures for the new learning environments with them. The administration thinks that they can obtain all this new information in 3 hours and remember it for the weeks to come. I know differently. We are to sit in our classrooms and or monitor the hall in this half hour of free time for the kids to bring back books and get things and get into their new locker assignments. I'm so happy about this idea. It gave me a chance to see some of my kids and ask them questions about their books. Some read, some did not. I don't care. I'm just happy to see their faces and hear the sounds of a noisy hallway again.
All right, so give some snaps and claps here virtually and physically. Somebody hear something that resonates with Becky's future?
I'm thinking about the protocols that administrators are kind of coming together. I think every district's a little bit different right now, and how far advanced people is, how much reality that is that you're talking about might very well be, but I can resonate with that because, man, I don't know. I'm not terribly looking forward to overly restricted kind of things, because I know students well enough that sometimes when we put the barriers in place, they're just like all the other humans that we see with COVID-19, right? Some people will like to play by the rules, and some people like to push the envelope as far as they possibly can.
Thank you. I would just add to, like with Becky's resonating, like, are there going to be some more policies and procedures, some consistency, which I think is challenging, because on the one hand, as educators, we want to set up our own classrooms and have our own way. And it's not just about the small things like wearing hats or chewing gum, but when and how and why are we going to send out announcements as compared to putting things just, you know, up in assignments and forms, and are we going to require synchronous meetings and not? I think these are some really substantive conversations that people are going to have as entire faculties over the next few weeks and months as we get ready for the next school year. Right. Who else has an imagined future that you would like to share?
I can share.
All right. Thanks, Carrie.
So I said, it's difficult to imagine anything other than a chatty, active science classroom full of students working and collaborating together. With a very likely approach being some sort of blended learning, I know that my in-person class time will be filled with as many science activities and experiences that online learning does not afford. As I see my students spread out across my classroom, it's difficult to come to terms with how things have changed. It feels weird and comforting all at the same time to be back in my classroom. I'm well aware that the hands-on activities come with potential for a greater exchange of germs, so consideration was taken to ensure that all students have their own sets of supplies and there isn't any sharing of lab supplies. I see my students being apprehensive yet happy to be able to do science again.
So some snaps and claps for that. I think that idea of just being happy to do science, that resonated for me. I'm sure, I know that's a passion of yours, so that resonated. Who else has a response for Karen?
Karen, I really appreciated how it was both weird and comforting. I think there's going to be like this strange bittersweetness to all of these things to come.
Yeah,
I agree. Oops, sorry, go ahead.
A friend of mine and I had a conversation earlier today, and we just agreed that life is just weird right now. It just feels weird, and you have to sort of be okay with weird, because that's just where we're at.
And if you teach in the middle school, it's kind of like coming home to weirdness.
Amen, Amanda. Amen.
One of
Yeah,
the things
I was struck by, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was struck by what was said about the hands-on activities being a chance to share germs. And that's something that it never even occurred to me when I was writing my scenario. So thank you for thinking about that.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was going to say that jumped out, was just the physicality of being present and touching real things.
I was struck by the idea of all students having their own classroom set of supplies. I teach high school, so the idea that all of them come with a pencil, like their own pencil, and aren't borrowing mine or their neighbors, would just be, I don't know. I don't know if that's even a possibility to even realistically think about.
Well, I did say we could imagine, so maybe I stretched it just a little too far, but
I can see the Ticonderoga truck backed up to schools now, delivering pencils.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Part of resident would be that hands-on-ness, right? Not just with science, but I mean, I don't know. I know, this is going to sound kind of weird, but I like to shake students' hands when they come in. Sometimes when I'm talking with them, when I'm having conferences with them, sometimes I can communicate feedback that doesn't just come through my voice, but sometimes a pat on the shoulder and just a little nudge on the elbow or something like that, just just being able to give a fist bump or even sometimes high fives, and all these little tiny authentic ways to kind of show a student that not only you care, but also that they're on to something and that you appreciate their thinking. That's going to be hard for me if we can't do stuff like that. It's hard. I bought a car last week and it was hard because don't you you shake the used car salesman's hand, because you've completed the deal, right? Or the sale, so conversations always ended like, well, this is the part where I would shake your hand, but just imagine that I did,
Just gotta get your elbow up and just
right. Isn't that where we're supposed to sneeze into?
Yeah. Good point.
Who else would like to share?
I'll share, and it actually sounded like it kind of ties in with what Andy just said. I focused a little bit more just like on my own kids, and I think they're missing those moments with those teachers and other people in addition. So it says that it is a fall morning, but with enough residual warmth to still sleep with the windows open. I am remembering the week's worth of working at the kitchen table, sipping coffee and waiting for my kids to make their way downstairs. Already I am eager to see the faces of the students I will visit, to hear their whispered exclamations as I first explain the activity I have brought for them to complete. Welcoming the return to a schedule, albeit one that looks only slightly familiar, I notice that my own children are faster to rise on these at-school days. They, like me, anticipate seeing the smiling eyes of their masked friends and enjoying a chance to connect in the less crowded cafeteria. As we file out the door, I take a moment to appreciate the coming and going I once took for granted.
Thanks, Amanda. Appreciate that vivid imagery of fall as we sit here in a 90-degree day here in Michigan.
Right?
We'll say I appreciate that, but I also hear the echoes again of whatever the new normal is and trying to figure out how we still negotiate all those relationships and moments like Andy was just describing too. I hear some echoes of that. I also wonder too, and not that there's all these silver linings, but you mentioned a less crowded cafeteria, the less crowded classroom. Maybe because you're only seeing half the kids for half the time, it's not the same amount of content that gets covered, but maybe the relationships that are built are better and stronger because you don't have so many students to manage. I do wonder if that might be, I hesitate to say a positive, but at least something that could be mildly beneficial. All right. Someone else like to share?
I can go next.
Awesome. Thanks, Janet.
All right. See if I can find where my writing is. I have a heck of a time managing all the screens. Still learning. Here we go. And all right. So what I wrote, I imagine smaller class sizes and using platforms to create learning experiences where students can connect more than we were able to in March and April, May. I've become more confident with screencasting, although I am not now. I have to keep practicing. More confident with Padlet and live writing using the Google Cells and spreadsheet. I can't imagine going back to solely relying on pen and paper, but still love writer's notebooks that will likely be transformed into digital notebooks from here on out. Most of this semester, kids were sending me photos of their writer's notebooks, but I'll pause there.
Thank you very much. Boy, that was prescient. We have a teaching demo for you when you join us in our institute next week. I think Becky might have a few things to say in response to what you just shared.
I do actually. But I'm gonna say, stay tuned if you're in the institute. My whole demo is gonna be on taking writer's notebooks and putting them in Google Slides and making them total digitally for students. And
Great.
Using some of the tools in Google Slides to make that as engaging as possible.
Terrific.
And what I heard out of Janet's was, that was what I thought was really cool, was that she almost was the student through all of this and all of the learning that she was doing with the transformation of going from that hardcore writer's notebook, which is still totally okay to have that hard copy of a writer's notebook and having your students do it, but also transferring to more digital, and then also learning how to do screencasts. And yet, she had that level of confidence, but yet now she's like, I'm not so sure anymore, but she's still willing to learn, and she learned a lot this fall, and it was really, really awesome to hear that through her writing.
Just to elevate something Amanda said in the chat, I love the line, I can't imagine going back to solely relying on pen and paper.
Yep.
Yeah.
That stood out to me too.
Yeah. Oh, Karen, yeah, you and Becky should talk. She's got some interesting ideas about what she's trying to transform her Google Slide notebook tool into that can be useful for your science class too. All right, who else would like to share?
Boy, could I share? I've been very quiet through most of these. I don't know if I'm going in a whole different way, I guess, but this just kind of sums up what I've gotten out of this. I've been a teacher for 25 years in a school district that doesn't have very much, but that doesn't matter because what I wrote really didn't come from there. It actually came, well, just listen. Here I am, June 9th, 2021. Remember a year ago, the CRWP asked me to write a future narrative about the 2020-21 school year. And finally, I cried. I cried about my family's future. I cried about my future. I cried about my students' future. I cried and I cried and I cried. I cried because I hated change. I hated not being prepared. I hated what was going on in the world. I hated it, I hated it, and I hated. And yet here I am. I realized that my family, my students, and myself survived the uncertainty. We made it through the change. We are more prepared, and our world is still turning. Oh, I wish I could have known back then what I know now. And oh, I wish I know now, right now, what I will know next year.
We're so glad to have your voice in the conversation, April. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share and giving me like something I haven't had for a long time, the feeling that I could share. So I do appreciate these webinars very much.
You're very welcome. And you're getting some nice little comments in the chat. Who would like to respond to April?
I just want to say thanks so much for being vulnerable in lots of different ways in your writing, and also for lifting your voice up here right now, April, because whenever people get to the heart of what it is they're really thinking about something, it can be kind of scary to do, but those things usually end up being more impactful than trying to stay above vague generalizations. So I really appreciate you sharing the way that you did. Kudos to you. And we're grateful.
Well, thank you for letting me feel welcome enough to do it.
Very glad you did.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we do. I don't know. Writers are among the most empathetic human beings that I know. And I think it's because writing is so damn hard, right? So you can feel, I'm confident in saying that all of us can feel safe in saying what we want to, how we want to say it, because of what writers do in their very nature, and that's that empathetic nature. You have to, I think, if you're going to write anything worth a darn, you have to be willing to dig into yourself first, lift a piece of yourself out, and then offer it to the rest of us. So wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Any other responses for April?
Yeah, I got one thing to say. It really reminded me, and this kind of echoes a little bit of what Andy said, but it really reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from F. Scott Fitzgerald. And it was like, he responded to a student asking them for advice about being a professional writer. And like, it's a longer passage, but one of the big things that he said was like, too many writers avoid their own strongest feelings because they're afraid of them, or because they're afraid of being sentimental. Yet those are the very things that will make your work ring true and affect us. And your stories have to matter to you, the writer, before they can matter to the reader. Your story has to affect you before it can affect us. If you're not risking sentimentality, you're not close to your inner self. And I think your piece kind of captured that spirit.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks for bringing in that quote too, Fred. We appreciate it. All right. Who else would like to give us a glimpse into your imagined future?
I could share.
Awesome.
Okay. Thanks, Lori.
Let me go find it. Okay. Since this is a perfect lesson, I'm freely, sans mask or shield, and gloriously back with my students, all my students, in our middle school classroom. It's October. A little noisy, but I don't mind, because that means the kids are having fun at the stations I've set up for math. There's my small group with kiddo number 1 bouncing on the yoga ball, and kiddo 2 standing, and kiddos 3 and 4 at the round table with me on individual whiteboards, working through a story problem. The other groups are working on math problems together, another group on Google Classroom and their online math notebook and slides, and the last group playing a fractions game with cards, groaning, depending on who's winning and who's losing. This is my challenge for fall. This is what I have to try to capture digitally if the perfect world of my dreams does not come to pass. Because my perfect world was not at all created as I threw things together this past spring.
Thank you, Lori. Thoughts, ideas, responses to Lori?
I just love the narrative quality that I'm hearing in a lot of these different pieces. You know, I can always tell. I can always tell when a story is good, and I've heard them through a lot of these because I have a tendency to close my eyes and just listen and just let you take me to those places. And I appreciate you doing that, Lori. And a lot of people have done that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're very much looking forward to having you as part of the Institute as well, bringing your math and ELA perspective. So thank you. Looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
All right. Other thoughts, reactions, and if no one else wants to share, that's okay, because I've got a little idea about how we could wrap all this up. But if there's someone else who might like to share, we'll give them a moment.
All right, I will do it.
Thanks, Fred.
As the new school year begins, it is like no other we have collectively or individually experienced before. It is a hybrid-like context by default. After years of unsuccessfully trying to find ways to maximize the one-on-one time I'm able to create within classes, the hybrid reality has made that more possible. My synchronous sessions are almost exclusively one-on-one or groups of 3 or 4 at most. I keep all student sessions to 15 minutes or less. And then I kind of drifted a little bit because I was thinking about more abstract things, but I'm also trying to refocus nearly every reading that we might do as a kind of mentor text that will directly influence or highlight an aspect of writing. Fiction and nonfiction alike, I'm helping students to see specific techniques that they can turn around and make use of as quickly as possible. So every reading becomes an opportunity for writing in a continual reciprocal loop. And that is what the work of the class looks like. The writing is as important as the reading, with no apologies, concessions, or justifications.
Right. Thoughts, reactions to Fred? I'll go first then real quick and just say, I just talked over top of somebody, but I would just say I love the no apologies, concessions, or justifications, making the writing as important as the reading. I think that was really powerful. And having those opportunities to talk with students in those smaller groups or one-to-one conferences that we don't often get time for in the hustle and bustle of the normal school day. Knowing that you can carve out those spaces in different ways is really important and powerful too.
I was thinking about the hybridization that you had mentioned and the kind of bringing together and the blending of all these different things. And I think a lot of us, maybe, I know I am too, thinking about the texts that I'm bringing into my classroom and the ways in which we write and the genres and the modes of our writing. So I also appreciate that thought process too. I've been kind of leaning like, this is resonating with me because probably for the first 8 years of my teaching, my classroom was more reading focused. And then I've been sliding more to the writing focusing. And so now I think it's weird, but I like it. I am more of a writing focused classroom now where the reading supports the writing instead of the other way around where we only write because of what we read. Now we're writing and our writing is guiding our reading. And I'm actually liking that better, mainly because there is an investment that students have. They're not being forced into a book. They're choosing a topic they want to write about, which leads them toward the books and the ideas that they want to explore. And so I can be abstract a bit there too, Fred, to kind of go off in tangents, but that's kind of what that reminds me of. And I think that's kind of exciting, to be honest.
I really liked in your how you talked about the reciprocal loop, and how everything becomes an opportunity, like the reading drives the writing and the writing drives what you're reading. I think that's, true for a lot of our classrooms, but like thinking about what fall looks like, before we left, we were tasked at our district to make a list of the standards we didn't get to. And for my English department, I'm like, as we met, we're kind of like, let's just make a list of the projects we didn't do, because really it's all a reciprocal loop. We just keep doing the same things, but changing the focus or adding new material or reading. So I think that's really something like we kind of have to think about going into the fall, is it's all going to be a reciprocal loop. The kids aren't going to have lost as much as we think they have.
And that even reminds me too, I don't remember the mentor that once said this to me, but I say it a lot, is that you teach the students that are in front of you, and you pick up in the moment where you're at, and you move forward, and we'll do what we can do. So this has been truly wonderful. Jeremy and I were talking as we were planning this session that, oh my gosh, the world has just been really crazy the last couple of weeks. And I know Andy and I had a conversation like that a few weeks ago, and I've had various conversations with others. And I can't tell you how important these Tuesday afternoons have been for me over the last 8 weeks, and especially this afternoon, to have us all just be in community and share some writing and share some empowered visions of the future, to think about what it could be and hopefully what it will be. I'm wondering, with our last few moments, if anyone else has closing words, things that you might want to say about the writing that you heard today, or maybe even things about the workshop series as a whole. And again, thanks to so many of you for being here today and elevating your voices, like Lori and April, who we hadn't really heard before. And if you would like to stay on afterwards, after we end the recording, we can hear your writing after the official recording is done too. But I think we have time for maybe 2 or 3 people to say a Twitter-sized bite, a summary, a little synopsis of where you're thinking and feeling and teaching is at, as we come to a close here. Who might like to share?
I just want to say, thanks to everybody. And I've been, not to all these sessions, I've been into some and not into others. I've led some, and like this one, haven't led others. But what I appreciate the most out of anybody who is choosing to use their time to better themselves for their students, I just think that's amazing. So when I look at the 12 different people that are on the screen, and some days there have been way more than 12, you all give me good hope, not only for my children, but also for students and districts around this area, because there are lots of people doing good work like you're doing here. And I just don't want that to go unnoticed, because I know what's going to happen, and we all probably know what's going to happen, is we're going to be given PD in some way, shape, or form through our districts, up through no fault of their own. And that PD may or may not match what you need. But you know what you need, and part of this is what I need too. I need you. I need these things. I need these spaces. And so to be able to see these come up for free, to be able to have conversation with people, meet new friends and old friends and people all along down that line, I'm just greatly appreciative of being able to learn and share and grow right along beside you.
And not to sound cliche, but no matter where we're at in the fall, and the trials that we've gone through with remote learning, for all of us, and where we're going to be moving forward when it comes to addressing racism and prejudice, and how we're going to fix that in our own districts, we need to stick together as educators. And we got this. We can do this. We just need to make sure we're sticking together.
right, well, I think with that, we are going to draw our webinar series to a close. I again thank everyone who has participated in any or all of our sessions. I am grateful that we've had these opportunities. We're thinking about what we might do to support educators in the 2020-2021 academic year. You are always welcome to reach out to me, troy.hicks@cmich.edu or hickstro@gmail.com. And we thank especially our colleagues that joined us, not only from Michigan, but from around the country, and even at some points during the webinar series from around the world. So we are so grateful to all of you for spending time with us. With that, on behalf of Jeremy, who is my co-host today, thank you for writing with us. And on behalf of all the Chippewa River Writing Project teachers who have been facilitators at various points over the last 8 weeks, I thank them for their time and expertise and energy, and thank all of our participants for being here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.